Hello, everybody, and welcome to this latest in the ValuesJam guest session series. And Andrew, brilliant to have you here. So, to kick off, please introduce yourself and tell everybody about your great work.
Great. Thank you, Alan. Thanks for having me. Looking forward to having a jam with you over this session. I'm Andrew, Head of People and Culture at an insurance firm called LifeSearch. I think it's probably nearly about a decade now, Alan, since we started working together on various projects. And the majority of my work, whilst they do retain the traditional elements of HR, the majority of my work is about culture, values-led behaviours, and everything to do with that. Yeah, really thrilled to join you for this conversation.
Good. And Andrew, I've got a follow-up question actually. You talking about the 10 years, let's just put that question in my head because, as you say, it used to be called human resources.
Mm.
And now it's sometimes called people and culture and even colleague experience and stuff like this. So, in your experience, how much of that is labeling and how much of it is a real shift in attitude for the function?
I think it's a bit of both. We very intentionally kind of almost rebranded ourselves away from HR probably about 8 years or so ago. I think in some minds, HR feels historic. Yeah, it's recruitment, it's disciplinaries, it's grievances, it's travel policies, all those kinds of things. And whilst, of course, you have to do all of that stuff, there are layers and layers on top of that, which arguably are more important because when you nail the culture stuff, when you nail the value stuff, those other bits tend to diminish or tend to look after it themselves. Yeah, for us, it was a very intentional move away. A couple of times when I'm networking or perhaps chatting to folks who aren't in my world, I might still have to say, oh, head of HR, because I think one of the last times I said to somebody I was the head of people and culture, they said, oh, so you hang up posters for a living then? No, I do a bit more than that.
Goodness me. Yeah, but it is this thing around intent behind the label. And I think you've answered very kind of politically correctly there. With in some cases it's intentional, in other cases it isn't. But that's not what we're here for today. We're here to have a values jam, and I've got the deck, so I'm going to shuffle them up a bit. There's 60 cards in here, so I hope you're going to choose one that is something that you enjoy. And so the way that we tend to do this is piles in front of me. So how many piles shall I start with?
Four.
Four. Okay, and they're going to be different sizes. And so pile one is on my left, pile four is on my right. So which number pile would you like?
Two.
That's the biggest pile, Andrew. So we've got 3, 6, 9, 12, 15, 18, 21, 24, 25 cards. So a number between 1 and 25.
23.
Oh, well, that's easy. So thank you for that. Oh, now I think you're going to enjoy this one.
Okay,
What do you think?
dokie. Wowza, balance. There is a big topic. Okay, we can have some fun
So
with this, I think.
I think so. So first question, what does balance mean? And there's a follow-up, which is more kind of imaginative. When you think of balance, what is it that comes to mind visually? What does it look like? What does it sound like? And what does it feel like? So either you can go with the metaphoric answer first, or else you can go with the more technical, up to you.
I might start with the metaphoric. The very first thing I thought of when I saw that card was a seesaw, as in everything being in balance. I suppose I then went inward a little bit and was thinking quite quickly about personal balance and the feeling of everything being I don't want to say balanced. I'm trying to find a different word, but everything being in check, everything being calm, everything being kind of as it should be, having a sense of everything that's kind of happening around you, being engaged with it, being content with it. That's where my mind went after the seesaw.
Okay. And you've made me think of a memory with my kids when they were young and going to the park and on the seesaw and having a conversation with, I can't remember, I think it was probably Lucy, who must have been about 4 years old. And so she sat on one end and is high up, and I'm sat at the other end on the floor. And I'm saying, come on. We're supposed to
What's
be
she
having
supposed
a
to do?
seesaw. And I said, well, but we're both sitting on the seesaw, so why are you staying up there and why am I down here? So that was all good fun. And then you said you went inward, and I noticed that you said you used the word should. You said, everything that should be in back or in check or whatever, something like that. And the thought that occurred to me was, well, should according to who?
Mm,
Because balance might it might be balance according to us, but to somebody else looking at us, they might not see that as balance, right? So it's a very perceptive, not perceptive, but can't think of the word, but it's that kind of thing that it has your own lens on it rather than be definitive.
mm. And I think maybe the should perhaps also means that, if there is a nirvana and everything else is absolutely balanced and we're always entirely calm, everything, just should be at that level. But that's not how life works and the real world works. And life events, work events, other circumstances get in the way to kind of throw you off balance, don't they? At any moment of any day. So yeah, I guess part of maintaining balance or finding balance is your reaction in those moments as to how you get yourself back in check.
Yeah, and I've not found out if this is true or not, but I think somebody told me that the guy that invented Tai Chi was asked by one of his students, Master, how is it that we always lose balance and you always maintain your balance? And he said, well, actually, that's not true. I lose my balance just as much as you. It's just that I'm quicker at regaining it, which I thought was a really profound answer because maybe there's never such a thing as balance over time. It's just a whole series of being off balance and then back on check, off balance, back on check kind of thing, right?
Mm. I think there's almost a meditational aspect to that. I guess the notion of watching the thinker. So I'm a lot quicker. Well, the master perhaps is a lot quicker at, in effect, watching himself and noticing that he's off balance. He has that realization much quicker than the student, and through life experience is then able to put into practice the things he needs to get back in balance. So that sense almost of being a bit disconnected from yourself and watching yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can imagine, the student realizing they're off balance when their face hits the floor, whereas the master, it's when they feel a twitch in their right leg, that's going to lead to something, so they deal with it so much earlier. So you started with that very strong image of the seesaw. What about sound? What sounds come to mind when you think of balance and also feelings?
Sound, again, I'm giving you my first instinctive answer.
Yeah.
Sound is ocean. That's the very first thing I thought of when I felt incredibly balanced, calm, in check. Invariably, it's often been by the sea. And I suppose, yeah, feelings. Um, Nothing required of me, nowhere else I need to be, nothing else I need to do, just right here in this moment. Um, this is everything I need to have. Everything now is just fine, just as it should be. I think that would be the feeling.
Okay. And we're going to probably think very similarly during this conversation in part. It'd be interesting to see if there are any significant differences. The sea, you've picked up on that, and maybe I've got a question, but first I'll just share with you. When I go on a trip, or either on holiday or whether it's on business, one of the things I really enjoy to do is stand by the seashore and just listen to that beautiful sound of the ocean coming in and lapping, and sometimes take like a 20-second video, that's all, and then randomly just play that again, at a totally different time to take you back there. I agree with you. It's a very calming thing to do. And so the question is, why is that? Why is the sea so calming?
I think with me, it's a sense of perspective. Particularly, I can think of similar moments where I've been sat, at the seashore, legs in the water, waves just gently lapping over you, and just looking out at absolutely nothing. I think we spend so much time facing inland, where everything is up there, huge towers and skyscrapers, or everything's coming at us, people, stuff, traffic, cars, buses. The rare opportunity to look out at precisely nothing. I just think there's something really freeing and uplifting about that, and just gives you perspective of your own scale, I suppose. And I wonder too, now you've just mentioned sounds as we were talking about that, maybe there is something about the sound of water, just, particularly in Brighton where I used to live, coming over pebbles, that provides a
Yeah,
sound, almost a bit of a sound bath effect. I wonder if there's something in that too.
yeah, maybe. And you've kind of moved from balance into perspective. And again, I should explain, in Values Jam, what frequently happens to everybody that plays is that memories, sometimes from a long time ago, are surfaced during the conversation. And the reason, I've been told by a psychologist in New Zealand, is that possibly previously lapsed neural pathways are being re-sparked by a values-led conversation, which goes very deep, and that's what causes the memory. So here's another one. I mentioned Lucy earlier. Maybe there's a connection there. She did her work experience day with me when she was 13 years old, and I was working at RBS's head office near Liverpool Street on Bishopsgate. And as we were leaving the building, I said to her, and it was kind of the first time she'd been into the city, into central London. I said, so what do you think of London? So 13-year-old immediate response was, everybody's in a hurry. You can't see the sky and it stinks.
How insightful and how correct.
No holds barred, right?
Gosh. That triggers a couple of things with me actually. I think you may know back in 2018, I took a career break and went traveling for
Yeah.
2 months in California, and so that's really where my connection to the ocean started, and I realized exactly what it does for me and can do for me. So some of those memories I've talked about, are entirely connected to that experience. But I came back from my 2 months of being a Californian beach bum. My very first day coming back to work was in our London office. Got off the tube at Moorgate, so your Liverpool Street comment made me trigger that. And I remember so clearly walking along the road, and just being physically overwhelmed by people just coming at me, at me, at me, at me, at me. And it was almost like a scene in like a Hollywood movie where it kind of went a bit slow motion, went a bit blurred around the edges. And my shoulders went up, just this visceral reaction to what is this? When I've spent 2 months lying on a beach listening to podcasts, going to sports bars, just what is this? So yeah, that really connected with me when you said, yeah, just everybody's in a hurry. There's just so much going on all the time, for sure.
And that experience that you've just described, I don't want to force this, but it sounds like it was kind of causing you to be off balance. It felt weird, right? That's
Yeah.
what you were describing, and not in a good way.
No, not at all.
Okay,
Not at all.
so that's interesting because when you were talking about overwhelm, I in December I went to Kolkata and also Dhaka in Bangladesh. And I don't know if you've been to that part of the world, but it is just crazy on the roads in particular. So, as an example, I went to like an evening pluralist ceremony. So it was in a temple, but not for any specific religion. And it was wonderful to be there with all of these people. I didn't really understand what was going on and couldn't ask anybody because nobody spoke English, but it still felt good. Anyway, to get back to where I was staying, it was a 1 hour Uber, and all the way we were like literally inches on either side away from another vehicle. And the driver was cutting in and out. Um, and it was, I think, £4.50, something like that, for an hour thrill ride. But anyway, the question I'm coming to is that I did feel off balance. It was totally alien. It was a complete overwhelm, but in an exciting way. So that was an interesting contrast to what you were describing. They were both overwhelm, but causing different reaction. So what's that about?
Hmm. What's that about? I think I guess after my travels, I'd reached a point where, if we're talking about balance, I really did feel balanced. I was in good physical shape. I'd spent 2 months, like I say, living a beach life. I found some monasteries and Buddhist temples around California. I spent the most wonderful afternoon at Lake Shrine. If you have a Google of that, up the coast from Santa Monica. Just really, I think for the first time, just stopping life and engaging with the spiritual side of myself. Um, and I think I just came back in I did come back in such a good place. And then I think it was from 0 to 100 literally in that morning, from landing back, on the Friday afternoon to traveling to London on the Monday morning with just the weekend to, I guess, reacclimatize. I think it just was the 0 to 100, just bang, there it is.
Hmm.
So maybe something about taking yourself from one type of circumstance to something so wholly extreme so very quickly. There was no gradient. It was from that to that in no time at all.
Yeah. And I'm thinking that another potential factor for my experience is that I had the security of knowing that I could go back to where I came from.
Mm,
It was kind of this adventure that wasn't going to last forever. It wasn't like I had to live there or anything like that.
mm,
Okay. And then you described some of your feelings as well. Nothing's bothering you and all of this sort of thing, which feels like a really good place to be. It's a little bit different to mine. So balance for me, it feels kind of really set, sort of being able to feel that if you don't want to move, nobody's going to be able to move you, kind of thing. A sense of strength and foundation. And then I guess from that comes the the good vibe about nothing else matters. There's something about that as well. Um, okay, and then because of that metaphor, we've naturally flowed into the more technical answer as well. So let's go to the opposite side of the coin. Can you think of a time when you've experienced imbalance?
hmm. Yeah, several. As I've reflected back on those, I think it's been one of two things: either asking too much of myself or having too much asked of me. Usually in a work context, multiple projects at once, early morning train rides to the other end of the country, this meeting, this meeting, this meeting, just that rat race thing of just trying to jam everything into one day. And there are only so many hours in a day, and there is only so much physical and mental energy that we all have to give to things. I think it took me a while to kind of get to that space. So yeah, I can think of plenty of occasions where I've really thought, would I say burnout? Maybe a step away from burnout, but just yeah, this is not good. This does not feel good. Do I want my human experience of everyday life to feel like this, on and on and on? Oh no, I don't. Yeah, so let's just try and get a bit of perspective on this.
Hmm. It's probably something that people, when they listen to this, are going to easily relate to. And I guess that's because we create this system that we kind of feel obliged to be part of at certain times in our life. And exactly like I remember being on the train at 6:30 in the morning to get to the office at 7 o'clock, so you weren't last in, and staying until 7 o'clock because you didn't want to be seen as the wimp that goes home early.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that carrying on and on and on. And nobody really benefits apart from the organization in some way. But even then, the organization probably doesn't benefit fully because the people are not performing at their best. So it's all false.
Mm-hmm. And in my leadership of my team, I think pretty regularly, I will say to them, yeah, if they're feeling a bit overwhelmed, or I've got this, or at the end of a performance meeting, there's clearly a lot on. So how are you looking after yourself? Or when they might say to me, "Oh, could I claim a couple of hours back tomorrow because something, I don't know, it's one of the kids' school plays. I can make it up later in the week." I'm like, well, no, you don't have to because you've given me that 2 hours ample loads, in the weeks and months prior to now, or actually when you can just sense that they're getting a bit like that, a reassuring word to say, as we're recording now, it's 1:30 in the afternoon. If you don't get that done this afternoon, the business is still going to be here tomorrow. Yeah, we're not going to go bankrupt. We're not going to collapse. Nobody's going to walk out because you haven't got to that thing this afternoon. So
Yeah.
focus on some tasks that are perhaps a little gentler, a little easier, and then come back to that one first thing tomorrow morning when perhaps you're a bit more fired up, got a clearer head, a bit more perspective. It's fine. It can wait. And not every people thing can wait until tomorrow, but the vast majority of them have. So I think just having that perspective, I guess it's almost an inner strength or confidence that I can manage my day, I can manage my tasks. That is enough for today. I've given enough today. To your point, if I carry on giving today, it's going to be poorer quality work, or I'm going to be exhausted the rest of the week. So maybe some inner strength, some self confidence, just to draw some personal boundaries. I think.
Mm. And related to the topic that we're thinking about, it raises a question in my mind because I've I've always strived to be the best that the team can possibly be in a team context, right? And that does put demands on people. Um, and so it's a question of striking that balance where you're not pushing people too far, but sometimes you are pushing them further than they believe they're capable of being. So how do you deal with that if you think that's a thing?
I think it is a thing. As a colleague in my team just now is chomping at the bit to take on more. We've been looking at an evolution in their job description, taking on some responsibilities from another business area. We've scoped that out. We've had several conversations about what that could look like. I've expressed, I guess, a bit of concern that that feels like an awful lot to be taking on just now. And then as we've gotten tiptoeing into that new role, a few other business pressures have come up that we weren't expecting, and lo and behold, they are feeling somewhat overwhelmed. So we've rowed back on a couple of the additions in their role. I've said, that bit over there, I'll take that. You focus on those big things over there. I can tick off a few of those things and give you some extra capacity. But yeah, I think the regular check-ins, and I think the human interaction of this colleague that all the time is bubbly, exuberant, can do, good company, good fun, and then you just see that slightly dim, or something's not quite right, just that little intuition, and then just kind of digging into that to try and understand what's going on. So we will still get her there into this bigger, fuller role, but I think it might take us 2 months longer than we thought, just simply because there's too much other stuff happening all at once, which we weren't expecting.
Mm. And you're taking me back to that conversation we had just a short while ago about the master and the student and about early signs of losing balance. And the other thing that comes into play is the stuff we didn't predict. And in my corporate experience, when I look back, very seldom is that given enough time and consideration, the unknown. And so people tend to fill up their capability or their capacity. And then because they haven't got anything extra, when something external does come in, it causes a bigger problem than it need have done if only you'd let a little bit be free.
Mm.
Um, you're nodding there, but so are
No,
you?
I agree. You don't, when those real world events happen, you perhaps haven't left enough so it's collective capability to deal with that thing. You've stretched everybody so far and wrung them out so dry that when that big thing happens, there is nobody really that can take it on, or has the energy to take it on. In which
Yeah.
case, you then have to look at other things and say, right, A, B, C, D, and E are just going to have to stop. But
Hmm.
they're really good ideas. They're really good things. We really need to do them, but that's just going to have to stop because we need to deal with this thing over here. And there is a personal knock on for that, I think, when you're the person leading those A to E's over there. I really want to get those done. I'm really invested in those things. I've put an awful lot amount of time and effort into making them happen. But just because that thing's happened over there, you're now dragging me away. And I've got to spend the next 6 weeks focusing on something that I have no engagement with, I'm not particularly interested in. And that's just really, really annoyed me. So you're starting to play with individuals, sense of pride, delivery, capability, confidence,
Mhm.
and that's a tricky path to walk.
Mm. And again, it's coming back to this notion that balance isn't a fixed state, it's constantly shifting. And you're taking things into account that have changed the landscape in order to regain your balance and maybe have a different agenda now slightly. So it's that,
Mhm.
I think you used the word confidence just now, and it is that inner confidence in your ability to make the right choices and decisions as you go, rather than feel beholden to a plan that was written 4 months ago in a different circumstances.
Mm. Mm. Yeah, and we have plenty of experience with that. We're a big, financial services firm, 500 odd folks now across three different locations, and plenty of other hybrid offices elsewhere. Things come up, things happen, trading conditions happen, regulatory events happen. The FCA come knocking at your door and say, "Hey, talk to us about this." Just stuff happens. But yeah, I guess I'm learning that maybe just ring fencing just that little bit of extra capacity, if to deal with those things, is probably quite sensible. And actually, if things rarely happens, but if things keep pretty calm and consistent, if you've saved 5% of capacity, then well, isn't that a nice period for your team to not be working at 100% for 3 months? They're working at 95%, and actually they can spend some of that 5% maybe just kicking back a little bit, because we know the next 6 months are going to be absolutely crazy. Or actually, there is a bit of a passion project that I'm really meaning to get into, or a thing I've been meaning to read about, or do some study on this. And actually, for the next few weeks, I've got that capacity. So I'm going to take that on. I think that can probably play into balance too. The fact that you feel that you're developing, growing, learning, and if that's an important personal value, I think that plays into that.
For sure. I'm smiling because I'm listening to you as if I was two different people, and I'm imagining being in somebody people listening to this now. So the one person is saying, "Oh my goodness, how refreshing to hear this guy talking about, having 5% capacity to be able to put that into what needs to be done. How refreshing that is, and wouldn't that be wonderful to experience? And it would be more effective." And then the other person is saying, "Operating at 95% instead of 100. What a waste of resources."
Mm. That is interesting. I wonder what causes those two different perspectives. I'm sure that there's a whole, we could spend an episode just talking about that, but I just could not imagine being that second person. You owe me those. I don't know. You logged off 4 minutes early. You owe me 4 minutes, or you. We don't do lunch breaks, but back in that world, you went to your lunch early and came back a minute late. You owe me, or yeah, clearly you've got more capacity. I'm just going to keep chucking stuff at you until you call in sick one day. I don't know. I can't imagine being that person.
Yeah. And it's also it's the time thing that fascinates me because it is such a false indicator. What would you rather have? A smart person who figures out how to do it in 10% of the time, or
Mm,
somebody who's a bit slow and it takes
mm,
them twice as much time as it should? And
mm,
it's like, come on, you'd be happy for that person to be leaving the office early if it was a brilliant idea and the business benefited.
yeah. And conversations I've had with colleagues over the years, and maybe I'm being a little too pie in the sky with this kind of thinking, but really trying to get to a position of almost kind of complete empowerment and trust, where yeah, okay, you have a monthly performance meeting with one of your colleagues. These are your goals, your targets, the projects. This is what I expect of you over the next month. Broadly speaking, don't really care how many hours you work, where you work them from,
Yeah.
what you need to do, balance it with your home life, blend things up, so that when we sit here, a calendar month from now, and we go through all of these things, you've done them all, or they're developed, towards the milestones that we agreed. If they're not, of course, we're going to have a conversation about why that is, and maybe some of those life events that we talked about earlier, or the real world getting in the way, that might explain some of it. But actually, yeah, if you're a bit of a whip crack leader, yeah, maybe there was a bit of laziness. Maybe Bob did take a day of holiday more than should have been reasonable. Yeah, maybe he has been, sat at home watching, Sky Cinema rather than, doing his work. Of course, So then there's mechanisms to deal with that underperformance, and then you help that colleague get better. So um, but I don't think there's an awful lot wrong with that approach. Of was it Richard Branson said something like, just recruit really good people and get out of their way.
Yeah, for
I
sure.
think there's something in that.
Yeah. Similarly, a colleague of mine quite a long time ago actually said, why is it that we spend all of this time and energy and money on employee engagement? And then followed it up with, if we didn't disengage people so quickly, we wouldn't have to do all of that stuff. And it's
Gosh,
absolutely, it's just so true.
gosh,
And
that's
for,
good.
yeah, and if you think about just the onboarding process in a lot of organizations, it's in a way it's not dissimilar, I don't think, from kids when they're growing up. It's like all of the creativity and innovation and fresh thinking being drummed out of them until the finished article.
Yeah. And I think the kids thing is perhaps an interesting metaphor. I'm not a father, but I've had plenty of young folks around me over the years, nieces and nephews. And I think a key bit about the leadership stuff, and I guess going back to the performance management bit, is the boundary setting. And I think there probably is some overlap with a kid that
Yeah,
when you behave, your child has just behaved in that way. That's not what you want, for your child's behavior. They've had a negative impact on a classmate or their sibling, whatever. So, okay, let's not do that. Here's the boundary, here's the line. Then they cross it again. Okay, we've talked about that already. And then they cross it again. Okay, we need to have a different kind of conversation or a different kind of reaction now to try and improve that. There's just a lot of lessons in, the development of a child, and actually just, I'm thinking this through. It sounds awful how you lead your people, but just clear boundary setting, reasonable holding to account, support, challenge, nurturing, coaching. There's a lot of overlap.
absolutely. And I have four children, and they were so helpful to me in a professional capacity because dealing with large teams was actually a walk in the park compared to dealing with children as they're growing up. And as you say, so many similarities. And you just brought back so one of the things that I tried to do, didn't always succeed with my kids, was um, when a consequence needed to happen because their behavior wasn't as it was agreed it should be, it was always down to their choice. So it's like you chose to do that again, and we've talked about what would happen if you did do that again. So don't put it on me. I'm just making sure that it happened, but it was you that made it happen. So remember next time. And
That's good. And perhaps a little too young, not maybe not too young, to start thinking about introducing values into their life. But again, it's just that conscious choice, isn't it? That in this next moment, I'm making the decision to behave like that, or to say that thing, or to act in that way. I'm making that choice. I don't think anybody else is forcing me to do it. So, that choice is either supporting the I suppose what would become their values later in life, or it's not supporting them, or I guess worse still, damaging them. So, there's almost some values lessons there from a pretty young age.
for sure. And I don't think you know this, but this year, ValuesJam Junior is being launched.
Oh, great.
And what convinced me to do it was I went to visit my grandson Jacob when he was 5, and I decided that I was going to play Values Jam with him, so the existing set. But of course, some of the values words he wouldn't understand what they meant. So I thought about how to do it. And so eventually I decided to do what I did, which was, Jacob, I'm going to read out these words to you from each of the cards, and we're going to make two piles. One pile is words you know, and the other pile is words you don't know. That's our first job. So we did that. The words he did know was a smaller pile. And then got him to force rank. So, Jacob, family or excitement, which is your favorite? And we went through this. His three favorite cards at the end were love, kindness, and beauty.
Gosh.
And then I asked him to choose one of those three. He chose the card love. And I asked him if he could explain what it meant. And he looked me
Wow.
straight in the eye and said, no, I can't explain it. So I said, okay, can you tell me what you do for people that you love? And he just said, I give them a hug. And that was like, yes, he's 5, but this is really valuable. And then I did the research, and ValuesJam is going to be an absolute winner for kids
Mm.
um, in a number of different ways. So, from understanding development of their own values, but also listening and empathy of others and understanding a different perspective. So, I'm hugely excited about it. I'll have to send you a deck when they arrive.
Yeah, I was
So,
just thinking that go ahead. Sorry, I
no,
said
no,
that just
no.
thinking about youngsters around me as I think about it. Yeah, there are clearly things that they do have something of a grasp of already. Yeah, whether it is love or kindness, compassion. Not treating that school friend in the playground that way, not being a bully. Being kind to people. So yeah, some honesty. Yeah, sorry, Dad, I did do that thing. Or accountability. Yeah, that was my mistake. I'm not going to do it again. I've learned from that. There probably is an awful lot of values, behavior stuff in there that we never really tapped into, or at least labeled it as such, because that they are so young.
100%.
Yeah.
And then this isn't really to do with balance, but in Values Jam, we can go off piste a little bit. I'll just share with you. It was a psychology study, and the psychologists asked children about their understanding of the word love. I mentioned it just now, and there's only two that come to mind, but I'll share them with you. And these are both kind of 7 or 8 year old children. So one said, um, love is what you can hear at Christmas if you stop unwrapping your presents and just listen.
Oh my gosh! Wow.
And then the other one was, when somebody loves you, they say your name differently. It sounds safe in their mouth.
You got me. That's beautiful.
And it's like the wisdom of children so underestimated.
Mm.
If I didn't tell you how old those kids were, you would probably be thinking, oh, this must be a highly qualified philosopher, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
7 and 8 year old kids, goodness me.
Just
Now,
going back to balance a second,
yeah,
yeah, the silence thing there just really resonated with me. I love silence. I think that is an important bit for me in terms of balance. Whether you want to call it spiritual balance or whatever it is, just that sometimes I just don't really want to hear anything, or I'll come home and I'll be making a dinner or whatever. There's some music on in the background, and sometimes I just have this little thing where I'm like, no, that's just a bit much, and I'm not blasting Megadeth or anything like that. But I might just say, yeah, actually, I'm going to turn that off and just be in this kind of silence for now. There was something I listened to a wee while ago. LBC James O'Brien, he does this podcast series, Full Disclosure.
right,
And there was a chap he interviewed a couple of years ago, and I'll try and get the story about right. I think for something about the first, I'd say about 13 or 14 years of life, he was a mute. And they weren't able to diagnose specifically why. I think he said that it was more so just a conscious choice, just because of aggression and things around him. He just went very inward and just wanted to keep himself to himself. And since has become, I want to say, the first black professor at Cambridge ever. He's about 35, 36 now.
wow,
So from that start, has just achieved incredible things. Um, and James asked him something like, so after those years and years and years of you just not talking, being in silence, didn't you miss out on things? And he said, no, the exact opposite. He said, I learned so much by just watching how people engage, really paying attention to the language they use, tone of voice, volume, how that's supported by body language. I just sat and I just watched the world for all those years, and it was just a wonderful learning experience. Again, I paraphrase somewhat, but that was the gist of it. That just stopped me dead in my tracks.
and there
Oh,
there is a link with Values Jam here again, because in business and also in education, we tend to be taught how to put across our point of view, presentation skills, all of that. But where's the teaching you how to listen? where's the teaching you how to ask really insightful questions and be curious?
Mm,
Because, just pointing to that story, I think he would have benefited far more than those people who are just being told to spout.
mm. Yeah, leadership 101, communication skills, influencing skills, presentation
Yeah.
skills. Yeah, well, what about actually just being quiet and listening and tuning into what's happening around you and the people around you?
Yeah.
Mm.
Now, in ValuesJam, you've got your opportunity to ask a question about balance. So let's do that now, if you would. And if it's a question that you already have the answer to off the top of your head, feel free to follow up with the answer. Or if you want me to go first, then I can. So ask your own question about balance, beginning with who, what, where, when, why, or how.
That's unfair. Why does it seem that too few people find balance in life? And I'm going to give that one to you. I've got a couple of thoughts. Maybe I've shared them already, but yeah, why do it seems so few people find genuine calming balance in life?
Hmm. So, for me, just a starter for 10, there's two things. One is that people become a slave to the environment in which they exist rather than looking after themselves in a conscious way. And very closely linked to that, I think, is a lack of confidence in who you are and instead trying to be what everybody else thinks you should be. So those were my two immediate thoughts. How close are they
Mm.
to yours?
Pretty close. That I think that second one, resonates with me. I suppose in terms of some of the self discovery I've done over recent years and my sabbatical. Just I guess it was a lack of confidence. Maybe you might even say like a lack of self worth in that I'm running around and doing all of these kind of brilliant things and achieving great results, but never really taking the time just to step back and look at it and go, "Oh, that was good," or "Well done for that." And maybe not having enough people around me in life that would just kind of raise you up or say those things or spot those things. I think those affirmations are really important. So I think I just kept going, kept going, kept going, kept going to prove myself that I could do things and that I could create success and that, the ragtag little boy that I was, he's done good. I think I self-propelled myself without even really realizing it. But then when I did become very conscious of it, I think a question that I became very familiar with was, what do I need right now? And just in those moments of real stress or exhaustion or whatever it is, what do I need right now? Rather than what do they need or how when can I go back to them or when does that task need to be finished? What do I need? And sometimes it is, like I said, turning the music off just to have a moment of quiet, or it is closing the lid of the laptop and going for a walk or finding something else. Just for this, it just feels like in this moment I need something, and just learning to ask that question and reacting to the answer.
Yeah, and we are the most important person we've got,
Mm,
and yet we often abuse ourselves. And I don't mean that
mm,
in an extreme way, but sometimes we don't even realize that we're doing it.
mm,
Um, okay, so I love what you just said, and it makes me feel that this is a good time to draw the values jam to a close on that note about looking after yourself because you're important enough. So there is always a final question, which is, what are you encouraged to do differently about balance as a result of this conversation today?
there was an immediate kind of almost slightly glib answer of keep doing it. But I don't. I think keep doing it. But also, I think we're just talking particularly about children and those people around us. I suppose maybe just if I can take on a bit of a coaching type mentoring role, to help them with balance, to help them set boundaries, to give them permission or help them understand they have their own permission to look after themselves, nurture themselves, develop themselves. I think I could play a more active role in doing that for people.
People generally or anybody specifically?
Thinking of my family, there's been a lot going on with my family in recent months. Elderly parents getting poorly and all those kinds of things, and I think yeah, but actually, to be fair to myself, I did do a bit of coaching with mum last week. That everything just felt a bit insurmountable, and everything just felt, apocalyptic, and it all has to be done now. Well, no, it doesn't. You can just kind of rationalize things, prioritize things. You're an 83-year-old woman with all kinds of things going on. That really doesn't have to be done at 10 o'clock at night. You really could just do that tomorrow morning and spend the rest of tonight watching TV. So, yeah, I've been doing a bit of that lately, but I think there's more to be done. Certainly with my parents just now. Reflecting on that colleague I talked about, where we're developing her role in her world, I think just really focusing on that to make sure that she can make that progression when it feels like it's the right thing for everybody.
Hmm. So mine is a bit of a cheat, really, because it was something that was already in track. But this conversation has made me kind of determined to follow it through and make it happen rather than remain a notion. So I was called up for jury service from the 5th of January. And I thought, in my line of work, the beginning of January is probably the best time to do it, probably not competing as much as it would be later in the year. So I agreed to do it, not realizing or not knowing that it would last for 4 weeks,
Gosh,
which was quite a drag on time. But the benefit and the brilliant learning was that if I compare it to previous years, normally I like a fast start to the year. I fill January up, get on with it. And of course, I was unable to do that. And a little bit to your point of turn the music off, it was so good to have a pretty empty diary with the capacity to deal with the things that are happening at the beginning of a year for people. And so I am going to block out my calendar pretty much for January next year and just put in the things that have to be done and leave the rest to do what it will do. So that's one thing. And then the other thing is a share with you. Um, and I'm seeing if I've got a book here.
you've always got a book.
Uh, well, here it is here. So let me see if I can. Oh, right, bear with. This is a pile of books that haven't been read pretty much. But earlier you were saying you were talking about talking to your colleague about, oh, well, if you're not in the right frame of mind to do that today, do something less demanding, come back to that tomorrow. Have you seen this book?
I have not, no.
Check it out because I think you would enjoy it. And Mitu, she won a book award prize. Um, I was invited because we were shortlisted for a different category, but she was the overall winner. And basically, what she was saying is that our approach to lists and allocating time to get stuff done and all of that ignores one important point, which is our frame of mind, mindset, capability at that moment in time. And she explained that when she had this notion that you should really um, tailor what you're doing according to you rather than being a slave to a list, people started saying to her, it's a load of rubbish. There's so much that's been written in the other direction. And she carried on and carried on, and then she wins a book award prize. So her acceptance speech was lovely because she said, when you believe in something, don't give up on it, carry it through. So I think you'll enjoy it. Have a
I'm
look.
going to look it up. Thank you. Great recommendation.
So Andrew, you're a qualified values jammer now, so I trust you've enjoyed it.
Yes. I have. I've really enjoyed that conversation. Thank you, Alan.
All right, cheers. Take care.
Cheers.